spoke to the dark and fleshed out the wonder of life. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. If the stars were made to worship so loud, I can see your heart in everything you've made. Every burning star a signal fire of grace. If creation sings your praises so loud, God of your promise, you don't speak in vain, no syllable empty or void. For once you have spoken, nature and science follow the sound of your voice. And as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath.
Hey guys, it's Mike here. Today I'm your live stream host and really excited to be able to also bring the Word of God to you here today. We're going to be looking at the story of Joseph and specifically about his family. And I just want to tell you, I think it's something that we're all going to be able to relate to. Maybe you feel the same way. I think everybody feels like their family might be a little crazy. I think crazy would be a fair maybe a kind word to talk about Joseph's family. And we get to see how God fulfilled his will and his purpose through Joseph's family anyway. So excited about that. Tim's going to be preaching the next 2 weeks after that. We'll go 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off until this series is over. We're really excited about this series in particular. We feel like for a time such as this is perfect. Hey, we want to take a moment and just give a quick shout out to Dane Pitzer. Dane, after the Easter live stream, guessed the number of Easter eggs that we had. He did it exactly. So if you were counting, the answer was 23 eggs, and he guessed exactly right, 23 eggs. So we do have a prize coming to Dane Pitzer. Dane, congratulations. It's coming your way. We're excited for that. Hey, two more things. If you are with LifeSpring, or maybe this is your first time watching, we would ask for you to take a moment and click on the communication card below. You can find that on our website, on Facebook, or on YouTube. If you click on that and you fill that out, it lets us know that you are with us, which is really important. And also, it allows for us to be able to pray with you and for you about any prayer requests that you have. If you have any updates that you'd like to tell us, you could do that on that communication card as well. Also, if you make a decision for Jesus, whether it is to make him the Lord of your life for the first time or to rededicate your life, you could do that on that communication card, and we'll follow up with you on that. Finally, we do have a link where you can give online. Now more than ever, we are really asking for the church, the body of Christ, LifeSpring Christian Church, to give their tithes and offerings, to be able to continue to do this ministry, to do it excellently so that we could reach people with the gospel. And also, here's the thing, there are people who are in need right now because of this virus and people who are losing their jobs. We want to be able to meet those needs and to help those people in need. So would you consider what you can do today, what you can give? And as we prepare our hearts for worship, why don't you take a moment and just pray and get ready to worship Jesus here today and ask him to speak to you in your heart and your life as we get into his word this morning. Thanks so much. God bless you. And I'll catch you next time.
Why don't you sing with me? Here we go. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Who breaks the power of sin and darkness? Whose love is mighty and so much stronger? The King of glory, the King above all kings. who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings the chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King of glory, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, 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 oh! This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. It is awesome to know that God sent his son Jesus to die for us so that we can go to heaven through Jesus. I was buried beneath my shame. Who could carry that kind of weight? It was my tomb till I met you. I was breathing but not alive. All my failures I tried to hide. It was my turn till I met you. You called my name and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness into your glorious day. You called my name and your mercy has saved my soul. And now your freedom is all that I know. The old man knew Jesus when I met you. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. Rescue, my sin was heavy, but chains break at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter, I was an orphan. Now you called me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future, my eyes are open, 'cause when you called my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. You called my name, and I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, into your glorious day. All right. Thinking Lazarus being called out of the grave and God calling him forth from being dead. God, too, has raised us from the death of our sins, and we can live in being forgiven by God. Oh Lord, you're my shepherd. You make me lie in fields of green. You lead me by the still waters. You restore righteousness to me. Though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil thing, for you are with me, and you comfort me. Surely goodness, love, and mercy will follow wherever I go. Surely goodness, love, and mercy will follow wherever I go. Surely goodness, love, and mercy will follow wherever I go. Oh Lord, you're my shepherd. You make me lie in fields of green. You lead me by the still waters. You restore righteousness to me. Though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil thing, for you are with me, God. You comfort me. Surely goodness, love, and mercy will follow wherever I go. Surely goodness, love, and mercy will follow wherever I go. Surely goodness, love, and mercy will wherever I go. Wherever I go, surely goodness and mercy. Sing it with me, here we go. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I said I'm gonna dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Sing it with me one time. I'm gonna dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Love and mercy wherever I go.
I'm gonna dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Love and mercy wherever I go.
Surely goodness, love, and mercy will follow wherever I go. Surely goodness, love, and mercy will follow wherever I go. Surely goodness, love, and mercy will follow wherever I go. Morning, I see you in the sunrise every morning. It's like a picture that you painted for me. Love letter in the sky.
Story, I could have had a really different story, but you came down from heaven to restore me. Forever saved my life. Nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, you are faithful and true. Nobody loves me like you.
Mountains, here we go. Mountains, breaking down the weight of all my mountains. Even when it feels like I'm surrounded, you never leave my side. Whoa, nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, you are faithful and true. I will ever worship you. Nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, you are faithful and true. Nobody loves me like you. Oh, what a song to sing. Oh, what a song to sing. Oh, what a song to sing. Oh, what a song my heart keeps singing. Oh, what a song to sing. Oh, what a song to sing. Oh, what a song to sing. Jesus, you love me, and I love you, God. Nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, I will worship you, forever worship you. Nobody loves me like you love me, Jesus. I stand in awe of your amazing ways. I worship you as long as I am breathing. God, you are faithful and true. Nobody loves me like you.
After Rachel's death, Jacob grew more and more obsessed with Joseph. After all, he was the son of his beloved wife. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, and everyone knew this. One day, after watching over the herd with his brothers, Joseph returned home with false accusations against them. Jacob believed Joseph, much to the dismay of his brothers. Jacob believed that Joseph was promised to him by God, and so he gave Joseph a beautiful coat. Radiantly decorated, this coat of blessing reminded Joseph how much he was loved. Every time he put it on, he was wrapped in his father's affection. But Joseph abused this promise and flaunted his father's love. Day after day, he taunted his brothers, and they hated him all the more.
So there's something that I learned when I was getting ready for this sermon today, and it's this, that if there's a golden child in the house, everybody knows it. It's not like it's a hidden secret. The parents know, the siblings know, and the golden child himself actually knows. I talked to some people this week, and I asked them about their own family dynamics, and without fail, that's what I heard. I heard that if there was a golden child in the house, then everybody kind of knew it, and let me tell you, there's some universal things when there's golden children in the home. Today's sermon title is The Golden Child, and we are in our Joseph series. Today we're looking at the story. It's one of the most well-known stories in all of Scripture. It's the story of when Joseph receives this coat of many colors from his father, this coat of promise from his father Jacob. And this story has a lot of different parts to it, and we're going to look at it from a lot of different lenses. But before we dive into this sermon, I just want to start off by saying we are talking about family here today. And anytime we talk about family, there's going to be a wide range of responses. So I'm very understanding of the fact that as people watch here this morning, some people are going to be maybe a little bit nervous or hesitant to talk about family because of their own family situations or dynamics. I myself lost my mother just a couple of months ago. So when I think about family, there's emotion that's attached to that. Everybody was raised differently. Some people have family dynamics that are absolutely crazy and nuts. Well, let me just tell you that today's story, we're going to be looking at a crazy, crazy family dynamic. Maybe you hear the word dysfunctional that gets thrown around. I think that maybe we could use that word to describe the family that we're going to look at here today, which is Joseph's own family. So we're going to look at this story, Genesis chapter 37, verses 2 through 4. And then we're going to look at it through the lens of 4 different people. We're going to look at this story through the lens of Jacob, which is Joseph's dad. And then we're going to look at this story through the lens of Jacob's wives. That's right, multiple wives. And then we're going to look at this through the lens of Joseph's brothers, and then through the lens of Joseph himself. And here's my prayer, here's my hope. My prayer is that as we look at our own families and our own lives, we're going to be able to step away from this sermon and we're going to be able to see that maybe we can trust God a little bit more with our own families. Sometimes family is the one place where we don't know how to talk about faith. We don't know how to talk about God. We don't know how to trust God in the midst of our families. And my prayer is that we can do that a little bit more, that we can trust that Jesus is doing a work in our own families and in our own lives, regardless of where we think we stand in the familiar familial structure. So we're going to read this story for what it is, and then we're going to look at the story behind the story, and then we'll read it one more time through fresh eyes. Genesis chapter 37, verses 2 through 4 says this: "These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives. And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel, who is Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him." The golden child. Let's look at the story through the lens of Jacob as we get started. This is really important, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time just looking at Jacob himself. And the reason why is because there's a lot of backstory here that we want to unpack, and I'm going to do it as quickly and as succinctly as possible, but it's important that we understand this fully through the lens of Jacob. Here's the reality. Jacob is the son of Isaac, and that's important because Isaac is the son of Abraham. And if you remember the story, Abraham is Father Abraham. He is the Abraham of promise. He's the one that God gave the covenant to, the threefold promise of land, nation, and blessing. And the story goes that God came to Abraham and said, "Hey, Abraham, I want to give you a promise and a covenant. And that covenant is this, that you will have a land flowing with milk and honey. And you will have descendants more than you can count. You will be a great nation." And the third part of it is that through you, all mankind will be blessed. A threefold covenant that he then passes on to his son, Isaac. And Isaac receives this same promise, and then Isaac marries a woman named Rebekah. And they end up having twins, and maybe you remember this story. Back up there. So Esau is born first, okay, and then Jacob is born second. But there's something unique about this, because Jacob is reaching up, grabbing a hold of Esau's leg, his heel, his ankle. And from the very womb, there was a struggle going on. I don't know if you've ever had sibling rivalry in your own home. Sibling rivalry seems to happen everywhere. I promise you, as I'm saying this, Tim is looking at his brother Rob right now, and they're having a little discussion. You would appreciate this. The reality is, sibling rivalry happens everywhere you are. If you're in a home and there's brothers and there's sisters, there's going to be sibling rivalry, all fighting for the love and the affection of their parents. It was the same in this circumstance, even in the womb. And so Esau is born, and then right then Jacob reaches out and he's grabbing a hold of Esau's heel. He's like, it's as if he's saying, "No, I want the promise. I want the blessing from Dad, not you." And so if you remember the story, they live their lives and then they grow up into men. A lot of times I think we think of the story of the stolen birthright, and we think of it through this idea that they were young when this happened. That's not the case. They would have been middle-aged men. You see, Isaac was about 40 when he got married, and he ended up moving on and starting his family. And they lived to be really old back then. And then we know that Isaac ended up becoming blind. He could no longer see. He didn't know what was going on around him. He couldn't work in the fields anymore. And so Esau and Jacob were out there being faithful, doing what they were supposed to do as sons. And Esau knew that he was going to receive the double portion. The double portion is really important, because the double portion of the blessing of the inheritance meant that he would receive all of this from his father, and his job would be then to take care of all the family and everybody that was there. It's not as if he was just going to get rich and everybody else would be poor, but his job was important because now he has to take care of the family. But there's something going on here, because Jacob, from the get-go, really wanted to have this blessing. And so he's out in the field, and he's working with his brother. And Esau sees him, and he says, "Hey, I'm really hungry. I've been working really hard, Jacob." And he's like, "I bet you have." And Jacob's sitting there eating from his bowl of stew. And then Esau goes, "No, I don't think you heard me. I'm really, really hungry, Jacob. I could really go for some of that stew right about now." And Jacob goes, I bet you could. Just like a good brother would, right? And he goes, "Well, what do I need to do to get that stew from you? What do I need to do? Like, just name your price." And Jacob goes, there is one thing you can do, because the way to every man's heart is through his stomach, right? Well, the way to manipulate men is through their stomach as well. Believe me, we think with our stomachs all the time. And the reality is, he ends up saying, you can have my birthright. I just want some of that stew. So Jacob goes, you've said the magic words. And he gives him his stew. It must have been some really good stew. Man, there was messed up stuff from this family from the start. Jacob is plotting to get this birthright from his brother Esau, and then he comes back, and if matters aren't bad enough for Esau, he sees his mom Rebecca, and his mom Rebecca's like, hey, Jacob, by the way, I really love you more than your brother. That's essentially how this plays out. And he says to Jacob, I need you to go ahead and steal the birthright from your dad now. You need to go in and convince your dad that you're Esau, because the bottom line is that Isaac was not just going to give this blessing. He was going to give it to Esau. He wasn't just going to give it to Jacob. So there was some plotting that needed to happen. And so Rebekah and Jacob go to the back room, and they were twins, but they were not identical twins, which is important because Esau was very hairy and Jacob was not. And so they put this wool on Jacob's arm, and then Jacob goes in. I'm sure he sat in the back room for a little while. He practiced, maybe he deepened his voice a little bit, and he prepared to be able to pass it off as if he was his brother Esau. So he goes in with this in mind that he's going to trick his dad on his mom's pressing and on her approval. This is what she wanted to do. So he goes in, he talks to his dad, and he goes, hey, Dad, it's your good son Esau here, and I just wanted to come in because I'm ready for this blessing. I'm ready for you to pass this blessing on to me. And Isaac's like, here's the deal. You sound like Jacob. You kind of sound like Jacob. I'm not going to lie. I think you might be Jacob. He's like, no, Dad, I promise. I'm Esau. I'm not sure about that. No, Dad, believe me. Would Esau lie to you? It's Esau. And then all of a sudden you can kind of hear in the back room, you can hear Rebecca going, hey, by the way, you might be going blind and senile. That's definitely Esau. And then the story goes that he ends up blessing his son Jacob, and he then gives him this double portion, and he ends up blessing him, which also meant that now God was going to give this promise of land, nation, and blessing onto Jacob. Yes, this family had messed up family dynamics from the get-go. So then Jacob ends up leaving. Why? Because he's afraid that his brother is going to kill him. Well, I would say so. You see, if I were Esau, I would be feeling very frustrated right about now. So Jacob hits the road, and now he's going off on a journey, and he encounters God. They have a wrestling match. God wrenches his hip, changes his name to Israel. You might remember that story. And he comes across this family while he's out. Now, traditional Christianity, or the traditional view, is that maybe Jacob was around 77 years old at this time. Well, historically, they would say that men would get married right around the age of 40, and here's why. Men would establish themselves. They would receive inheritance from their parents, their family. They would go out, they would establish themselves. They would get goats and chickens and cows, and they would own fields, and they would try to do whatever they could to establish themselves well. And then when it was time to find a wife, then they would go, and there was this thing called arranged marriages. By the way, as a parent of a teenage daughter, I am for arranged marriages. Let me just say that out loud. The reality is, then you know that this person has the ability to be able to take care of your daughter. And so I'll give you a cow, some chickens, a goat, and if I could have your daughter in marriage. And back then in that culture, that was a big deal. And so Jacob shows up on the scene, and he sees this family, and he finds out that this is the family of Laban. Let me tell you why this is significant. Because Laban is, well, it's Rebekah's brother. Now, if you remember who Rebekah is Jacob's mom. And so when you look at it like that, all of a sudden you're going, wait a minute. So this is family. This is Uncle Laban. Yes, it is. And by the way, I saw this girl, this shepherdess girl. She's 14 years old, and she has her flock. And I think she's beautiful, and I found out she's your daughter. Can I marry her? Yes, you heard me correct. And right now, teenage girls everywhere are rolling their eyes, and they're going, ew. And let me just tell you, I'm right there with you. That's absolutely gross. In our day and our age, I would be right there with you, rolling my eyes and saying, ew. I taught my students a word this past week, and that word is ethnocentrism. It is a $1 million word. Here's what it means. It means that we have a tendency of seeing our culture and our world through our little lens. We have a circle, and we look at that, and it's hard for us to see the world outside of us or anybody else, any other cultures being as good or right as ours. And so we commit this thing called eisegesis, when we just read a text and then we just try to interpret it through our own lens and our own eyes. What we have to do is we need to step away for a moment. Like I said, things were much different then. This was about 4,000 years ago. And he sees this young lady, and back then, I don't know how, I don't know why, but relatives, they would get married, and things like that would happen. It was much different back then. I'm going to let Answers in Genesis take some of this stuff off of my plate. If you want to go and find good resources on this, you can go there and get a ton of good resources. But what I know is it was not uncommon. As a matter of fact, the age of 14 was about marrying age for a lot of young ladies back then. One more thing I want to say is that Jesus' own mom was very young when she got married. This was culturally acceptable and normal back then. And so he goes to Uncle Laban and he says, "Can I have your daughter's hand in marriage? I think she's beautiful." And not only do I think she's beautiful, I think she is the best thing on planet Earth. And he talks to Uncle Laban. Let's look at that passage really quick. It's Genesis chapter 29, verses 17 through 20. And at first, he sees Rachel, but then he finds out she's got an older sister named Leah. So that's the reference to Leah here. It says this: Leah's eyes were weak. You ever do that? You ever go on a blind date and then come back? How was your date? Not so good. Her eyes were weak. Leah's eyes were weak. For some reason, that was a big deal. But Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance, and Jacob loved Rachel, and he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." And Laban said, "It is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to any other man. So yes, stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years. That was his dowry. That's what he arranged, was 7 years of work so that he could marry Rachel. And they seemed to him but a few days because of the love that he had for her. Isn't that cute? He loved her so much that he was willing to work for 7 years so that he could marry her. He's already what we would see as an old man, but they lived to be very old, so 77, maybe middle-aged. And so he decides, yes, I'm going to work and I'm going to do this for 7 years because I love Rachel with everything I have. It was love at first sight. Have you ever experienced love at first sight? I'll tell you this. I don't know if you believe in love at first sight or not, but I actually experienced love at first sight when I was in college. I went off to Lincoln Christian College in Lincoln, Illinois. It's right in the center of the state of Illinois. You just point right at the center and you'll probably hit Lincoln. And I went there and I saw this young lady from halfway across campus, and as soon as I saw her, my heart just started fluttering. She had some strong eyes, I'm telling you that, man. It was absolutely amazing, this beautiful, beautiful young lady, and I spent the rest of my freshman year trying to get to know her and kind of building a relationship. If we would have dated that year, it wouldn't have worked, but it was love at first sight for me, and I just knew it. She married me. I want to tell you it was love at first sight for her too, but it just simply was not. I had some work cut out for me, some work to do, and even to this day, I pinch myself. The truth is, I do believe love at first sight happens because I'm a living example of that. And so he worked for 7 years so that he could marry this woman, this woman that he had eyes for. He definitely wanted her for his wife. And after 7 years of work, I love that. Let's read that one more time, verse 20, chapter 29, verse 20. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but just a few days because of the love that he had for her. That is so, so gross. The truth is, he loved her so much. And if you remember the story, he worked the 7 years, and then he gets married to Rachel, right? And so Rachel then is put in his tent at night by Laban, and they become husband and wife. And that next morning, when he wakes up, I guess it was dark in the tent, and he didn't know, and he wakes up the next day, and to his surprise, Rachel's not laying there, but weak-eyed Leah is laying there. And he says, wait, what's going on? Where's Rachel? Did she disappear? And Leah goes, it was me the whole time, Jacob. Surprise. And so Jacob goes to Laban. He says, hey, Uncle Laban, I have this problem. You see, we made an arrangement that I would work for you and that you would give me Rachel to marry. And Laban says this. He goes, yeah, but here's the deal. It's not customary for me to give the younger daughter first, so I had to give you my older daughter. You can indeed marry my younger daughter, Rachel, but you need to work for me 7 more years. And so he made this agreement. He married her immediately, but he agreed that he would work for 7 more years. And here's the deal. He didn't go from 1 wife to 2 wives in that moment. He went from 1 wife to 4 wives. Let me explain this. When Leah came over and married Jacob, she came with her maidservant, Zilpah. And then when Rachel was handed over in marriage, Laban said, well, then Bilhah, your maidservant, needs to go with you, Rachel. And so he ends up marrying Leah. Then he ends up marrying Rachel, and he marries both of their maidservants at the same time, sister wives. Nothing could go wrong with that, right? Yeah, I couldn't imagine a single problem in this marriage and in this relationship. There's an interesting thing about this story, and I just want to say this, that back then, the best thing a wife could do, like her entire duty, was to have children for her husband. This was it. This was the best thing that a wife could possibly do. I'm not saying that to be sexist. That is the reality of the world that they lived in. And if you gave your husband male children, you were a really, really good wife. And right out of the gate, Leah ends up giving 3 male sons. There's a weird text here that I just want you to read with me because I think it helps us to understand a little bit more theology. I think a lot of times we want to say that we believe that God's in control of everything. Well, this text here is Genesis chapter 29, verse 31, and it says this. It says, when the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, he enabled her to have children, but Rachel could not conceive. Yes, the family dynamics were bizarre, and God looked upon Leah, and he said, I know that you're not loved. I know that he doesn't love you the way he loves Rachel. I want to make sure that you feel loved and that you know that you're loved. And so he allows her to have 3 sons right out of the gate. And Leah right now is looking really good. And she's feeling good about herself. She's feeling good about herself because she's doing the job that a great wife is supposed to do back in that day. 3 sons right out of the gate. Reuben, Simeon, and Levi. I actually have a chart for you because it gets confusing here. So let's pull that chart up. Let's look at this chart. The chart is this: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, all by Leah. And then Rachel, she's barren at this time. She can't have children. And so her womb is closed. So she looks at her maidservant, which was customary back then. The wife could not have children. So then they looked at their maidservant and they passed their maidservant off and said, okay, now I want you to get pregnant so that team Rachel could actually have a baby here. And so Team Leah has 3 children, and then Bilhah, her maidservant, ends up having a son. So now it's Team Leah 3, Team Rachel 1, and then Leah ends up having another child, and then Bilhah ends up having another child, and then after that, we read that Leah's womb then gets closed for a little while. So now they're not having babies. She looks over at her maidservant, and she says, hey, I need you to start having a couple of children now. I need you to start having kids until I can have kids again. So Zilpah then has 2 sons, and then Leah then has 2 more sons. Still, Rachel has 0. And so when you're looking at this, everybody's having sons. They're doing what they're supposed to do, except the one that Jacob loved from the get-go, which was Rachel. And so you can imagine it from all the other wives' perspective. It's like, yeah, he may have loved her more, but she hasn't been able to produce. And so therefore, we're looking really good in Jacob's eyes right now. And then Rachel has a son, and his name is Joseph. And the moment he has this son, they saw the look in Jacob's eyes as he bends over and he picks Joseph up and he looks into his eyes and he goes, wow, you have your mother's eyes. He was melted from day one, and everybody knew that Dad loved Joseph more than the rest of them. There's something else you need to know. Rachel goes on to have 1 more son. It's the last of these sons, and his name was Benjamin. And when she gives birth to Benjamin, she passes away. And the only thing that Joseph has left is to be able to look into their eyes and to be able to see and remember the woman that he loved more than any other woman on planet Earth. Their marriage was relatively short, but he never forgot Rachel and the love that he had for her. Let's look at this story really briefly now through the lens of Joseph's brothers. You see, Joseph's brothers were, well, let's just say this. They had a pecking order. They understood how things are supposed to play out. You see, Reuben is supposed to receive this promise from his father, this double portion, and he's supposed to then take care of the family. That's the way things are supposed to go down traditionally. But this is not a traditional family. This is much different than any other family that was around there. You see, Jacob ended up marrying 4 women, even though he only wanted to marry 1 from the get-go. And the sons, as they're being raised and as they're growing up in this household, they all know clearly, my dad loves Rachel more than my mom. My dad loves Rachel so much. They heard 2 stories all the time. The story of receiving this blessing, this promise. They heard this story possibly of this stolen birthright. And then they hear the story of Rachel again, and again. Don't forget, the reason why I'm your dad is because I loved Rachel. Now, could you imagine from their perspective, they want to please their dad. They want their dad to love them. There's definitely sibling rivalry going on in this household. And it's thick, man. You could cut it with a knife. Here's the reality. The reality is that through their early years, everything's established, and everybody knows, everybody's looking up to Reuben. Everything's the way it's supposed to be. Rachel's not having kids. That's a good thing, because now we can establish ourselves in this family. We have nothing to worry about. And by the time that they'd been established, everybody knew Reuben's supposed to receive this double portion or this blessing. And then after all of these children are born and all of these sons are being raised, finally this baby Joseph is born. And they see the way their dad picks him up and looks in their eye, into his eyes. And then they knew right from that moment things were going to be different. You see, now there's a golden child in the family, and this golden child, well, all bets are off now because dad looks at him and treats him much different than he treats all the other siblings. I don't know if you have a golden child in your home and what that's like, but there was no mistaking in this family that Joseph was the golden child. Every time they saw him, they were reminded and they remembered that he was the one that was the favorite. And let me just say this, all the other kids in the family, when there's a favorite, they tend to just want, wish for, and hope for the favorite, for the golden child, to mess up, to stumble, and to fall. Just bring you down a couple of notches so that mom and dad can see that I am just as good as you. And so you can see this through Joseph's brothers' lenses. They hate Joseph. And the moment that dad, listen to this, they're out in this field, right? And they're working. And while they're doing this, this crazy thing happens. Joseph disappears. Where did Joseph go? Oh, that little punk. I mean, he's probably out just doing whatever he wants to do, and he's going to get away with it because dad lets him get away with whatever he wants to get away with. Oh, no, Joseph had something else in mind. He went back to dad, and he tattled again. And he was telling on his brothers because he wanted his dad to know, hey, Dad, I know that you love me, and I know that you respect me, and that you like me more than my other brothers, so I just wanted you to know that they're goofing off out in the field. The Bible says that he brought a bad report, a false report, and the brothers, man, they were beside themselves. They were so angry. And I don't know when they heard or when they found out that Joseph went back with this bad or this false report, depending on how you read this passage. But at some point, he comes back. They're angry. They're angry because they're tired of their brother constantly playing their dad like this. He's constantly getting away with murder because he's the golden child and everybody knows it. Well, the only reason why he can do that is because that's Rachel's boy. Well, there's nothing we can do about that. We can't control who we're born to. But dad loves Rachel. He's always loved Rachel. And now that she's gone, Joseph is all that he has left. He's the firstborn son of Rachel. And I'm just so tired and frustrated of this. You can picture his brothers and how thick that was. And then all of a sudden, Joseph comes walking out with this beautiful coat. Hey, guys, you see what dad did for me? Dad made me this coat of many colors. And by the way, it's worth thousands of dollars. Nah. Dad loves me more than you. Yeah, I would say that they hated him a lot, and that's probably an understatement. Now let's pause and let's flip this and let's look at this through the lens of Joseph. Joseph, from the day he was born and his dad picked him up, there was something different about this relationship he had with Joseph than any of his other sons, and he had a lot of them. And when he looked down at his son, and Joseph was there with his mom, Rachel, he was raised in the first few years of his life, and he just knew that he was special. He knew that his dad loved him so much, and he knew that his dad loved his mother so much. And there was something different about the relationship that Jacob had with Rachel and that Jacob had with him than he had with any of the other sons. And let me ask you a question. Do you think Joseph knew it and he knew how to play off of that? I would say yes. And so what we know is that he ends up manipulating the situation. He ends up teasing his brothers and taunting his brothers and playing with his brothers and getting under their skin from time to time. Let me tell you something, that the golden child has the ability to be able to get away with stuff other people don't. And as he raised up, I'm sure he wanted to make his dad proud. But I think what he was trying to do was trying to prove to his brothers, this is my own guess, that he deserved and he was deserving of this love that his dad gave for him. So he wanted to show them everywhere he went that he was somehow better than them and that he deserved this love from his dad. Now I know this much. I know that as he was taunting and teasing his brothers, he probably knew that they didn't like him very much, and he probably felt the reason all that more to prove to them that he was deserving of this love. Let's look at this story of him receiving this golden, this coat of many colors, this golden child in front of his dad. Let's look at it one more time through fresh eyes. Genesis chapter 37, verses 2 through 4 says, "These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers, and he was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah." Why? Because Rachel had passed away at this point, his father's wives. "And Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. And now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him." I would say so. We go to find out that they hated him a lot, actually a lot. To a point where they really didn't even want him alive anymore. I would say that Joseph's family dynamics were interesting at best. Maybe it's starting to make you be a little bit more thankful for your own family. I don't know. What I'd like to do is I'd like to just talk about the minimalistic facts of this story. These are things that we can all agree upon. These are just facts about this story that help us, I believe, to understand a little bit more how God works in and through situations. And the facts are this. Number one, Joseph tattled on his brothers, possibly with a lie. So they were out and they were shepherding the flocks and they were doing their work, and he comes back and he brings a bad report to his dad. That's just a fact. And he was the golden child doing this, which made it all even worse. Number two, Jacob had a special robe made for Joseph. And this robe was a very expensive robe. It made a massive statement. It was the coat of blessing. Make no mistake, his brothers would have seen that and been like, "Oh my goodness, Dad gave him that coat?" There's no doubt that he's giving him the double portion as well. Number three, Joseph flaunts his coat to his brothers. And as he flaunts the coat to his brothers, you can picture all of his brothers just welling up inside of them. They wanted to punch him so bad in that moment. "Oh, but you're the little brother, and if I lay a hand on you, Dad is going to hate me forever. I can't do that." And the last one is Joseph's brothers hated him so much. That story of their hatred for him just continued to grow and grow and grow. Actually, we backtracked a little bit. Last week we talked about his dreams. That comes after he gets the coat. But he gets the coat, they hate him. He tells them the dream, they hate him even more. He tells them another dream, they hate him even more. And that hatred wells up and wells up and wells up and wells up. Here's your takeaways for today. Takeaway number one is that God will use any family member to fulfill his will. Any family member to fulfill his will. I know sometimes we look at our family and we think, man, my family's messed up. There's no way God could use me or anybody in my family. And I just want to tell you that's just simply not true. Joseph's family was absolutely messed up, and they were the family of promise. They were the one that God left the covenant with. And there was all kinds of stuff going on here, and I would argue that God not only knew it was going on, he was orchestrating it. And now what I mean by that is if he's opening and closing wombs, he was certainly fully knowledgeable of what was going on in that home, and he had a plan the entire time, and he gave Joseph those dreams for a reason, and Joseph didn't know how it was going to play out. He didn't know exactly what was going to happen. But as he's wearing this coat of many colors, they're like, we're never going to bow down to you. And we come to find out years later that they come to bow down to him. But God is going to fulfill his will through any single one of your family members, through you and anybody else in your family. The second takeaway is this, that God had specific plans for all of them. Now, you might be the golden child in your family, or you may have been the golden child in your family. In my family, I was the middle child. And I could tell you that we carry stuff with us for years after we're raised. We hold on to weird stuff from our childhood, man. I want to say this, that no matter what your system or whatever you are in your family, I believe this with all of my heart, that God has a plan for everybody in your home. And we can question God and we can question how things are, or we can trust God and say, God, I know that you have a plan, and I don't know what you're going to do with me specifically, but all of these boys, these 12 boys, end up becoming men who then become the 12 tribes of Israel once it's all said and done and established. God had a plan for all of them, and the plan was powerful, and we're going to unpack that as we move on in this series. The next one is this, that favor doesn't mean better in God's eyes. Favor doesn't mean better in God's eyes. I think sometimes we mistake that. And we feel like we have to have a place of prominence, a place where maybe our parents will look at us and say, hey, you're more important than your siblings, and here's why. Good parents don't say that. Good parents, right? We're not supposed to say we have a favorite. But like in this moment, I probably might have a favorite. And the reality is this, right? When we have family structures, we begin to kind of settle into things. There may be things about a specific child that we appreciate, and so we gravitate towards that. We want to encourage that. We want to stoke that. At the end of the day, I want to say, wherever it is you are, whatever you feel favored, if you're not favored, it doesn't mean that your sibling is better than you. If you have a child that you don't favor as much, it doesn't mean that your other children aren't less blessed by God. It just means this. It means favored is not necessarily better, and I would argue this, that if you are the favored child, it comes with its own set of challenges. If you're the golden child in your home, you might be looking around and being like, yeah, I just know I always have to like measure up. I always have to get straight A's. I always have to do all of these things. I can't do anything wrong because I don't want to let my parents down. It's not always good. And when your siblings look at you and they want you to fail, that's not a good feeling. Let me say this. I believe this with all of my heart, that God wants to do a work in every single one of us and in all of our families if we just let him. We have to get over our stuff and just leave it in the hands of God. So let me leave you with this thought. Remember this. Remember that God will work in and through the craziest of families in order to fulfill his will and purpose, even yours. Can I pray for you as we wrap up here this morning? I'm excited for the series. I want to pray for you. I want to pray for communion as we get ready to take communion. And I just want to pray that God does a good work in your family and in your life, and that we can trust him more and more with our own family. So why don't you pray with me, and let's get ready for communion. Dear Father, we come to you right now, and I just want to pray that, God, you can do a good work in our lives. God, our family dynamics can be crazy sometimes. We acknowledge that. And God, we don't always know why. We don't know why we're in the family that we're in. We don't get to pick that. We don't get to choose that. But God, one thing we can do is trust you. And so we trust you with that. God, I want to pray for each person watching right now. I want to pray your blessing over their life and their families, that they can submit to you and trust you with all things, God. And even though we can't see the story, you're opening wombs, you're closing wombs, God, you're doing a work in our life, and we just trust you in that. And God, as we get ready here for communion right now, I just pray that we can take this bread and this juice, and God, that it can glorify you, God, that you can be glorified as we do everything we can to honor you, to worship you in this moment, in this time. God, you are so good. And in your goodness, we just give you praise. We give you thanks. God, we just want to ask that you could be glorified in our lives and we can make you famous. God, you again are worthy. And I just want to pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen.
to the Lord. All creation, sing to the Lord. For he has done great things. He has done great things, Lord. Let's sing the first verse again. Here we go. Sing to the Lord, all creation, sing to the Lord, for he has made all things, he has made all things, the Lord. Turn to the King. All the nations return to the King. For he has done great things. He has done great things. Oh, the King. The heavens declare the works of your hands. From mountains to valleys, sometimes it's hard to understand. All created things show his love for us. Stars in the night sing out his praises, and we lift our voices to sing. King of Kings, to the King of Kings. Turn to the King. All the nations return to the King. For he has done great things. He has done great things. Oh, the King. Oh, the King. The heavens declare the works of your hands. From mountains to valleys, sometimes it's hard to understand. All created things show his love for us. Stars in the night sing of his praises, and we lift our voices to sing to the King of Kings. Sing to the King. Sing, sing, sing to the Lord. With hands lifted high and hearts open wide, we sing. With hands lifted high and hearts open wide, we sing.
Roll take one. Hey guys, it's good to see you again. Thanks for joining us for the live stream. Like I said, today was a doozy. These family dynamics were nuts. Maybe it makes you a little bit more thankful for the family that you have. I have no idea. But here's what I do know. I know that Jesus will continue to do a good work in our lives if we just let him, if we open up our hearts, we open up our minds, and we invite Jesus to invade our space and to invade the space of our family. God bless you guys. Have a fantastic week, and may this week be the week that we make Jesus famous.